Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of my Unmatched Strategy Guide Series. Today, we're going to be taking a look at our first hero, King Arthur. We'll be giving his whole deck a rundown, giving you all the information, the details, the juicy tidbits of strategy and whatnot, and we'll just explore his entire character together. This video is for everyone, whether you have never played as King Arthur before or you have played as him 50 times. You might learn something today. That's not a guarantee. But I will show you every single card in his deck, so if you've never seen any of them, you can read them and you'll understand them just fine. However, I will reference other heroes and their cards, and I'm not going to show you graphics for them because, well, these videos get like 50 views, and that's too much effort. So this is the third video in this series, as I have mentioned. So go watch the other two at some point. And please, if you like this content, leave a like and consider subscribing. It encourages me to make more of these things, as I should say. So let's jump right into King Arthur. The first thing I want to talk about is his specific character info, starting off with his stats. So he has 18 health points, and he's a melee fighter. 18 health points is currently, as of the Buffy the Vampire Slayer expansion, the largest single character health total in the game. I know the Raptors from Jurassic Park have 21 if you combine them all together, but those are really 3 individual characters. So 18, he got a lot of health. 15 and change is about the average for heroes, so he has about 3 more health points than normal. He has one sidekick, Merlin, and Merlin has 7 health. 7 is about average for sidekicks. And together, they have 25 hit points, which is the largest total health pool in the game. There's, I think, Angel and Sherlock Holmes both have a total health pool of 24. And when I say health pool, I mean all the health you have available on your team. So in this case, it's King Arthur's health plus Merlin's health. So they're pretty beefy guys. Merlin is ranged. That is very good because as King Arthur is melee, he will have to get very close to his enemies and battle them and probably take some retaliation hits. Merlin is ranged and can attack them from afar, which is good. It also lets Merlin probably survive for a little bit longer than normal because Merlin won't be right next to enemies and they probably will have less opportunities to hit him. However, the one downside about King Arthur is that he is a move 2 character. Move 2 characters are all right, but generally move 3 is a lot better. And if you're a move 2 melee character, you can sometimes get outranged by move 3 characters because they can move further than you. So if they attack you and then move away, you can't directly move and attack them back. You're going to have to either use a special card that lets you move more, or you're going to have to boost your movement. And we'll get to why boosting movement isn't so good in a second after we read King Arthur's ability. So it says, when King Arthur attacks, you may boost that attack. Play the boost card face down along with your attack card. If your opponent cancels the effects on your attack card, the boost is discarded without effect. So the reason why King Arthur doesn't want to have to boost his movement is because he's already going to be using a lot of cards to boost his attacks, which means if you're using cards to boost your attacks and you also have to boost your movement in order to hit people, you're going to be leaking cards left and right. So that's why his movement is kind of a downside, but against other move 2 characters, you should be fine. So let's break down his ability a bit more. It is only for King Arthur, so you cannot use this ability on Merlin. It is only when King Arthur attacks, so you can't boost to defend. And your opponent will know you are boosting your attack before they play their defense card. And if the effects of the attack card are canceled, such as your opponent played a feint or some other similar card, the boost card is discarded with no effect. Yeah, this ability is kind of booty. Because for a number of reasons, I should say. The average boost value of all the cards in King Arthur's deck is about 1.9, which means it's probably going to be a value of 2 or 3 on average. If we take a look at Alice's special ability, she can change size to be big or small. And when she's big, she deals an extra 2 damage every time she attacks, but she doesn't have to use a card, and that effect can't be canceled by a feint, which makes that ability so much better than this one. And just the fact that your opponent knows you're boosting, and they can just play a feint and it just completely nullifies this ability, makes it really easy to play around and very frustrating sometimes to play as King Arthur, because it feels like you never actually get a chance to use your unique power and let your character shine. However, none of your effects are super great, which just makes it easier for opponents to hold on to their feints, because they know you don't have a powerful card like Forever Hide or Wolf Form that they need to feint, otherwise they'll just die. So they can pretty much just hold on to feints until they see you boosting, and then they just cancel it. So this ability is telegraphed, rather weak, and expensive on resources, which is why it's not super great compared to literally any other special ability. We're going to take a look at some cards now. We'll start with King Arthur only cards, and then we'll look at Merlin's cards, and then look at the leftovers. We're going to start with the most important card in King Arthur's deck, which is Excalibur, and a card associated with it called Lady of the Lake. These cards will be up on screen later in the video, so don't worry about me skipping over it too fast. So Excalibur is a 6 value attack, with boost value 3, no text, and only 1 copy. So this is the best card in King Arthur's deck, obviously, because a 6 value attack is ridiculous. It can't be canceled by a feint, which is really nice. It also makes it a good card to boost, because if you play this and boost it, and your opponent plays a feint, they may as well, they might cancel, well, they do cancel the boosted card, but the Excalibur will still deal 4 damage to them. That's a pretty good chunk of damage to deal to someone. So this is a good card to boost. But if we take a step back and look at this in a larger context, this is the best card in King Arthur's deck, and he only has 1 copy. As you'll see very shortly, he has another card that lets him find this card again. But Bigfoot has a card called Larger Than Life, which is also a no-text 6 value attack, except he has 3 copies of it, which immediately makes King Arthur seem a lot weaker than Bigfoot. And this is supposed to be like a really powerful card for King Arthur, but he only has 1 of it, which makes it very susceptible to discard effects. If you're playing against Medusa, for example, and you end up discarding this card, yeah, you're probably just going to lose the game from that. And continuing with that, if we look at Lady of the Lake, you get to search your deck and discard pile for the Excalibur card. Add it to your hand. If you search your deck, shuffle it. You only have 1 copy of this. This effectively lets you play Excalibur twice. That being said, that's assuming that you have already played Excalibur first and you're using this to get it back from your discard pile. This card is subject to a large amount of randomness, because if you draw Excalibur first, that's great, because then you'll play Excalibur and then later draw this and get Excalibur back. But if you draw this card first, you kind of want to wait for Excalibur and then play Excalibur so that you can use it twice. Because if you just use this to search your deck, that's really not great. And once your opponent knows you have Excalibur after you play this card, they can play cards that make you discard cards, or Sherlock Holmes has a bunch of useful cards if he knows what's in your hand. So you shouldn't really play Excalibur predictably, but against some people, you might have to play it the turn you draw it, otherwise you're just going to lose it. So these 2 cards in King Arthur's deck, like, they should be really strong, but they end up just kind of making him look weak by comparison to other decks, and they make his entire attack strategy kind of subject to randomness in the order of the way you draw cards. Like, if this card and Excalibur are both at the bottom of your deck, good luck. The next card I want to talk about is Noble Sacrifice. This kind of fits into the theme of King Arthur boosting his attacks. This is a 2 value King Arthur only attack that says during combat you may boost this attack. And this is in addition to any boost from King Arthur's special ability, which means you could actually boost an attack twice if this is the card that you attack with, and you boost it using King Arthur's special ability. This card is actually a lot better used as a boost card than for the actual attack card, because it is the only 3-valued boost in King Arthur's deck besides Excalibur, and he has 3 copies of this card. Another reason why this card isn't so great as an attack is that it's very similar to a card called Second Shot, which appears in Medusa and Muldoon's deck. But in Medusa's deck, it has a value 3, which makes it a lot better to attack with, because when it gets fainted, at least that card deals 1 damage. If this card gets fainted, it deals 0 damage. So if we look at the best possible scenario for this card, you play it and boost it with another 3-value card, which is probably another Noble Sacrifice. And then during combat, you boost it with the 3rd and final Noble Sacrifice in your deck, which deals 2 + 3 + 3 damage, which is 8 damage for 3 cards. That is very expensive, requires the use of all 3 of your Noble Sacrifices, and you have to actually have those in the same hand, which is pretty unlikely to do during the game. You can only do it once, and if it's canceled, it does 0 damage, assuming that they played a feint, which has 2, and it would cancel both boost cards and just end up dealing 0 damage. So even in the best scenario, it's really kind of bad. And when you use this normally, on average, you're going to get around 2 value out of your boost cards, which means this is probably going to deal 4, maybe even 5 damage if you boost it with another Noble Sacrifice. And most defense cards are usually 3 to 4. So you're spending 2 cards to deal 1 to 2 damage. And I don't know, it's just not that great. This card is a lot better used as the boost value, because you can attach it to another attack that has a higher value than 2. If you put this on a 3 or a 4 attack card, at least you'll deal some damage if it gets canceled. So I really think that this is, you rarely should you play this as the actual attack that you're going with on your turn. The next card is Aid of Morgana. This is a 4-value King Arthur only card. You only have 1 copy of it, and its effect is after combat, draw 2 cards. This is a really decent attack card. King Arthur needs card draw to be able to constantly boost his attacks, because every time you're attacking and you boost it, you spend 2 cards, which means you're going to run out of cards pretty quickly. So a card like this that replaces itself and gets you another card is very good. And a 4-value attack is also good. I would not boost this card, however, because if you boost it, your opponent will probably be more likely to play a feint or a cancel effect. And you want the actual text on this card. You don't want it to get canceled. So I would play this without boosting it so that they don't cancel it and you can get the 2 cards, which is very, very good. The Holy Grail is a 1-value defense card for King Arthur that says, after combat, if King Arthur has 4 or less health but is not defeated, set his health to 8. And you only have 1 copy of this card. This is a very efficient healing card. It could possibly heal you for 7 health, which is an insane amount for this game. However, the weakness for that is that all of your healing is only on 1 card, which means it's going to be more inconsistent than if you had 3 cards that said heal 2 hit points. And it's slightly predictable when you're going to play this card, because there's a certain health range you have to be in order for the effect to take place, which means your opponent will kind of know about when you're going to play it, which gets me into my next point. It's kind of risky to use when you're at 4 or less health, because yes, you'll know it'll trigger if you're still alive after combat, but your opponent will also know that you could play this card as an option, and they might play a big attack and just outright kill you before you actually get the heal off. Which is why you cannot wait until you're at 1 or 2 health, because this card is pretty poor in block because it only blocks 1 point, which means if you wait until you are about to die at 1 hit point, you're probably just going to die. That's why when I play this card, I like using it at about 5 or 6, so that when I eat a 4-value attack at 6, I go down to 3 points and then heal back up to 8. It's a little less risky than using it at 4 to die, but the other person might also just not play a big attack. They might play a regroup, and then that's really bad if you're above the hit point threshold. So there really isn't like a perfect time to play this. You kind of have to know your opponent's deck, what like how much health they can take away from you in a single turn, and you kind of just have to be able to predict that accordingly and then play this at the right time so you can get the heal off. This is a pretty good defense card. King Arthur already has a buttload of health, and this just adds to his total health pool. The next few cards are very similar. We're going to talk about Divine Intervention and Swift Strike, which have very similar uses and effects. So Divine Intervention first is King Arthur only. It is a 3-value versatile card. You have 2 copies of it, and it says, after combat, move King Arthur up to 5 spaces. So 5 spaces is a lot of spaces to move in a single movement, especially for a move 2 character like King Arthur. This can be used defensively to either move away from someone you just attacked, or move away after being attacked. And it can be used offensively. If you attack first on your turn, you can use this card to move to a different enemy, attack them, or you can activate a momentous shift if you move around the same enemy or move to a different enemy. So overall, this is a really solid card. It's not great at 3, but you can boost it, and the ability is pretty good for a move 2 character. And the next card, very similar, is Swift Strike, which is a 3-value attack only, but it can be used by either Merlin or King Arthur. You got 2 copies of this, and it says, after combat, move your fighter up to 4 spaces. 4 spaces obviously isn't as good as 5, but 4 spaces is still a lot of movement in this game. This card is good for the same reasons that Divine Intervention is good. However, it's attack only, and once again, it's any, so that Merlin can use it. And speaking of Merlin, we're going to talk about Merlin's cards now. He's gazing into my soul. Generally, you want to try to keep Merlin alive. There are some sidekicks that you just don't care about, like Sinbad's Porter. You don't give a shit if he lives or die. But Merlin actually has a lot of very powerful cards that you can only benefit from if he's alive. So you want to try to keep Merlin alive. It also helps that he's a ranged character because he won't be right in the fray of things. But if he does die early, almost all of his cards have a boost value of 2, which is pretty decent. And you'll just have a bunch of cards to use as boost fodder. The first card of his is Prophecy. This is a scheme with only 1 copy of it, and it says, look at the top 4 cards of your deck. Add 2 of them to your hand, and put the other 2 back on top of your deck in any order. This is a really good card for just being flexible in the moment and trying to find specific cards. It's a very good card draw card because it's better than just drawing 2 cards because you get to look at 4 and keep 2. And this is a pretty good tool to reload your hand after a couple turns of maneuvering and attacking when you might be low on cards. But you can basically just use this anytime you have less than 5 cards, and it's a very powerful card draw tool. The next scheme from Merlin is Command the Storms. Move each fighter, including opposing fighters, up to 3 spaces, and you have 2 copies of this. This is a pretty good effect, but I find that I don't really like using this card that often, generally because if I'm going to use this as a move and then attack someone, it feels bad that I don't get to draw a card when I move because I'm not actually maneuvering. So that turn I'll use at least 2 cards, if not 3 if I boost an attack. But moving 3 spaces is a powerful effect because you are a move 2 character, of course. And being able to screw with enemy positioning is great, especially if there's someone like Medusa who oftentimes hides behind a huge wall of 1 health sidekicks. So you can get those heroes out from behind their sidekicks and make them a little bit more vulnerable. However, you should be aware of activating enemy momentous shifts. If you're going to move someone towards you and then attack them, they might be able to block with a 5-value momentous shift, which would be pretty bad for you. So keep that in mind. The next scheme from Merlin is Restless Spirits. Now this is super complicated for no reason, but I'll do my best to explain it. Choose any space in Merlin's zone. Deal 2 damage to each opposing fighter in that space and in 1 adjacent space. If at least 1 fighter is defeated this way, draw a card. this is in the first set, of course, so they were probably trying to make the wording like very specifically simple, but it ends up just being extra wordy. It basically means you deal 2 damage to someone in Merlin's zone, and you can also deal 2 damage to someone next to them. And if you kill someone like that, you get to draw a card. Generally, I would try to always have this draw a card when you play it. That way it replaces itself, and you don't lose the number of cards you have in your hand. And unblockable damage for King Arthur is great. You always want to use this if you can to try to hit 2 spaces. And this is really good for clearing out those pesky 1 health sidekicks, as I mentioned with Command the Storms, because King Arthur can hit pretty hard, but he doesn't have a lot of area of effect cards, which means if you have to spend like 4 turns in a row just using a butt ton of damage on a 1 health enemy, you'll waste all your good attacks on them, and then when you actually have to fight the hero, you'll be kind of empty-handed. So this is a really good card for getting rid of those, and it has synergy with a bunch of cards that let you move other people, like Command the Storms, which we just saw, Bewilderment, which is coming up, Skirmish, and Swift Strike, because you can use those to move Merlin into a better position to use this card, because it has to be in Merlin's zone. So if you move Merlin into an enemy zone, you can blow shit up. The only attack unique to Merlin in this deck is a 4-value 1 copy called Aid the Chosen One, which says after combat, if you won the combat, draw 2 cards. This is just like Aid of Morgana, which is the King Arthur only attack, except it's slightly worse because it's the effect is dependent on whether or not you actually win the combat. But drawing 2 cards is a great effect, as I explained earlier. And attacking with Merlin, you want to kind of throw some change-ups in there, because if you attack with King Arthur the whole game and then throw this out from a Merlin, it might be a little obvious that you're playing this card, and it might get canceled. So I would generally try to not telegraph the fact that you're playing this card from Merlin, because it is a really good card, and you don't want it to get canceled, because you want that 2-card draw effect to happen. This is a really good attack. Value 4 is good for the same reasons that Aid of Morgana is good. And lastly, for Merlin, we have a 0-value defense card. What? You have 2 copies of it. It's called Bewilderment. During combat, prevent all damage. After combat, you may place Merlin in any space. I'd like to point out that the during combat effect, where you prevent all damage, is only during the actual calculation of how much damage you're taking. If the enemy has an effect that says after combat, deal 2 damage to the enemy fighter, you'll still take 2 damage from that effect. This is a great defensive sustain card. It is really annoying to play against, because throwing out like a 4 attack only to have none of it go through, it feels so bad for the enemy, and it feels so good when you play this card as Merlin. Also, this card art is insanely good. I really like it. It's trippy. You don't want to use this predictably, though, because if the opponent knows you're going to play this, like if Merlin has 1 health and you're blocking, they might play a feint, which would cancel this card and just wreck you, because this literally blocks no damage if the effect is canceled. So I typically will just play the first one I draw, the first chance I get to defend with Merlin, just because you don't want to wait until the end and have that get canceled. And the after combat effect, where you get to place Merlin in any space, is great, because when you're playing a defense card, it's not your turn, so you'll be able to set yourself up to be in a great position for next turn. This also synergizes with Restless Spirits, as I mentioned. And lastly, the basic cards in King Arthur's deck. We've got Feint, Skirmish, Momentous Shift, and Regroup. King Arthur has 3 copies of each of these, and I'm not really going to go into much depth about these, because I've made 2 videos already about all these cards. The first video is about Feint solely, and the next video is actually about Skirmish, Momentous Shift, and Regroup. So if you want more information on those, you can go watch those after this video. I'll put some links in the description. Maybe there'll be a card popping up on the screen. Who knows? But anyway, Regroup, specifically for King Arthur's deck, is only 1 boost. Usually in other decks it's 2 boosts, but they wanted to limit the amount of good boost cards King Arthur has, because generally regroup is kind of a bad card, so it would be very useful as a boost, but they wanted it to stay a bad card, so they just made it one. Momentous Shift is also really good here. I would not boost Momentous Shifts for the same reason that I told you not to boost Aid from Morgana or whatever it's called, because this has a pretty good effect. If you start your turn in a different space, it's a value 5, which is already something opponents want to cancel. And if you boost this card, it'll just give them a telegraphed reason to cancel it. So I would just not. So that's it for all the specific cards in King Arthur's deck. And before my final thoughts, I wanted to have a comment showcase, if you will. I found 2 comments that I thought would be interesting to have a discussion on. So the first comment comes from Mr. Tots, who says that he boosts regroup with King Arthur sometimes. I think this is interesting because I didn't really think of this as a possibility, because for me, regroup's base attack value is too low to actually get a good boost off of, because the maximum damage you could do with it would be 4 if you boost it with Excalibur, but I don't know why you do that, or Noble Sacrifice. But I see the reasoning behind it, because if you actually do win that combat, you'll get 2 cards, which is great because you'll replace both of the cards you just used to win the combat. But I see the downside is only having a maximum value of 4, and usually it's going to be 3. You probably won't actually win that often, but it would be good if the outcome of that battle would be you at least drawing 1 card. It'd be even better if they wasted a high value block card instead of just canceling the regroup. But it would be bad if they did end up blocking it with a feint, because you wouldn't end up dealing any damage. But I think this would be an interesting strategy to throw out occasionally, because if you play against the same person every single time, you want to switch up your gameplay so that they don't see your moves coming. And the next comment comes from David Peacock, who asked about my thoughts about nerfing or beefing up characters who aren't balanced. And it's no surprise that King Arthur isn't balanced. He's quite weak, and I think that stems from his ability probably not being that great. I think they probably should have done something else, but what do I know? I wasn't there when they play tested it. The main problem for me comes from when the boost gets canceled and then the boost card discarded. That just feels really bad. It feels bad that it's so easy to just block King Arthur's ability without any strategical planning or skilled gameplay at all. It's just like, oh, I see that you're boosting that card. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to play a feint. That's what it boils down to for me, and that just, it feels kind of bad. So there are a bunch of possibilities for changing his ability. None of these I think are particularly good. This is like a mix of things I've read online or come up with myself. There are things like canceling a boost card returns the card to King Arthur's hand. I think that would make it too easy to spam boosts then. If King Arthur puts down the boost after the defender blocks, I think that kind of removes the mind game element from the game, though, because defenders, if they see you boosting, they don't necessarily have to cancel it. They can play down like just a big meaty block card, and it can really just lead to some swinginess if they block with like a regroup or something, and you boost it to the high heavens. The boost happens during combat, like Noble Sacrifice. I think that is way too powerful for King Arthur. King Arthur could also start with Excalibur in his hand, but that leads to even more variance. If like the other player knows you have it, that could be bad for you. But also, if the other person just doesn't have good block cards, they could just lose the game because they take too much damage right from the beginning. And you could also have multiple copies of Excalibur, but I think the main problem is that Bigfoot shouldn't have 3 copies of Larger Than Life. That's the main problem for me. You could also increase the damage that Noble Sacrifice does, either to 3 or even 4. I think that's probably the best solution, just because then you're motivated to use that card as an attack and then boost it, instead of just using the 3 copies of that as the boost 3s that you're going to use that combat. So anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts about what changes you'd make to King Arthur to make him more powerful, and how you think they would positively impact the game. And now it is time for my final thoughts. I think in a vacuum, King Arthur seems to have a handful of neat effects and a hard-hitting ability, but in practice, the ability is quite weak compared to other heroes, and it can seem more of a hindrance to the fun aspects of his character instead of something that is powerful and he can really celebrate. Well, I think poorly of King Arthur overall. Merlin is definitely one of the strongest sidekicks in the game, and the potential mind games that you can get from boosting attacks can create really awesome moments between you and your opponent. And I think the attacking in this game is what makes it shine. The mind games are so much fun. And boosting can highlight the positive aspects of that. And I think it's okay that King Arthur is seen as weaker than other characters. Not every single character should be on the same power level. It's okay for strong characters to exist, and it's okay for bad characters to exist. I usually play as King Arthur when I'm playing against someone who's new to Unmatched, just so it's like a little bit of a handicap for me, or a challenge mode even. And I encourage people to not completely rule Arthur out, because he definitely can win games. It's just that you'll be at a slight disadvantage, which I think is okay. Because some people they like playing as like underpowered characters, so that when they do win, it's seen as more meaningful for them, and I think that's fine to have. So let me know what you think. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. To the 3 people still watching, I love you very much. Leave a like if you enjoyed it. Even consider subscribing. Both of those would be very nice to have. And I am glad to have you here on this journey. The next video I am making will probably be about Sinbad, and that will probably come out in the week after Thanksgiving break. I just need to find time to make it. So thank you so much for watching, and peace out.